We continue to see you in the Gemara. The Gemara says that on Yom Tov, on holidays, it means Pesach, Shavuot, and Sukkot, it is a mitzvah, a kiruv, compulsory for a person to make his wife and family happy. There's a pasuk. You should be happy on the holidays, these 3 holidays. Make your wife and children happy. The Gemara says, how does a person go about bringing simcha to his family? The Gemara answers, well, what brings simcha? Wine. You drink a lot of wine, it brings simcha. The Gemara says, that's for men. How about the women and children? Especially the women. The Gemara answers, women, there's only one way to make them happy, and that's by buying them new clothes. Buy a woman new clothes, that to her is a happy holiday. So this is a mitzvah, to have new clothes bought for a wife and family. The Gemara says now that the time that the Mikdash existed, then simcha was only by eating meat. Meaning a festive occasion, a meal with meat in it, that is simcha. Since the Mikdash was destroyed, since then, simcha is only with wine. That's what the Gemara says here. Now, it is not mentioned here why. There is a very hidden midrash. It's not the regular midrash. It's one of the extremely hidden ones, and to be very frank, I have spent, honestly, 20 years looking for the midrash. I never found it until, ready to say last summer, I found a source in a very old encyclopedia. I forget the name of the midrash. It's one of the midrashim which are practically unheard of. And there, the statement is brought that this famous statement which I'd heard as a child yet, my father had shown, my grandfather had shown, but I'd always searched for the origin. The statement is that since the Mikdash was destroyed, the rich taste of meat was taken from the meat and put into the bones. You cannot get the pleasure of the original pleasure of meat that existed during the time of the Mikdash. That is gone now, and if you want that pleasure, that extremely good taste, you'll find it by sucking out the marrow of the bones. That will give you an idea of what the taste of meat was like. Now this is naturally fact. But there's also a joke said about this, that there was an old man once who was sitting and eating a meal, and he was eating a plate of meat, and he was crying. The rabbi saw him, and he asked, why are you crying? He said, I'm crying because of the Churban Bet HaMikdash. The Holy Temple was destroyed, and there's no more taste to the meat. Meat is only in the bones. The rabbi said, you're not crying over the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash, you're crying over the destruction of your teeth. You haven't got any more teeth, so you can't chew on the bones. That's what you're crying about. Because the fact is that in the marrow of the bones, there you will find a semblance of what the real taste of meat was like. Now the Gemara says that it is so. There is no longer that rich taste, fuller taste of meat, and therefore what previously was the cause for simcha now has been transferred to wine. Wine can bring simcha to a person, to the heart of man. Women are not supposed to drink wine. Women are supposed to be given clothes, new clothes for the holidays, the chagim. The Gemara goes into a series of matters of advice on worldly matters, local matters, business, personal matters, and in other words, we deviate now from the regular halachot, laws. The reason is that the Torah teaches midot, character also, and advice at the same time. The Gemara says many times we are told advice in the Gemara about business matters, and this not only to lead us properly in business, but also just for spite, to show people who are businessmen and think that the rabbis of the Gemara were ones who knew nothing about life, they were immersed completely in the study of Torah and nothing else, here the Gemara shows us the rabbis of the Gemara knew more about business matters, more about worldly matters than the wisest of these businessmen, diplomats, and so on. The Gemara says that Rabbi Akiva taught his son, Rabbi Yoshua, a number of items. First, he said, do not sit and study Torah in the center of the city, which means in an open place where people pass by. Simply because if you want to study and concentrate, you cannot do so if you have people passing by who may interrupt you. You must have a place that is set aside for that purpose. The place to study Torah is in a Bet Midrash. You can't do it where it can be interrupted every moment, because you must have the ability, the opportunity, the opportune place where you can sit, concentrate, and learn without interruption. Secondly, do not live in a city as if you have a choice. Do not live in a city where the leaders of the city are chachamim, Talmidei chachamim, where the mayor, the politicians are Talmidei chachamim, because it's true that they will sit and study Torah, wonderful, but at the same time, they will be so engrossed in their learning that they will become immune to the problems of the local populace. And there's a place for everything, for everyone. It's good to have Talmidei Chachamim in the yeshiva, peace. But as far as leaders of the city, you have to have those who will devote their time to the problems, solving the problems of the population. Therefore, live in a city where you have ones who are not Talmidei Chachamim as the leading figures in that city. Advice 2, do not enter your home suddenly without knocking. And kol shekain, surely do not enter your friend's home without knocking. That is extremely improper, impolite, and can cause embarrassment. You might walk into your house when the family, one of them is doing something which is not modest at the time, and to walk in suddenly, or they're not dressed properly, well, it's embarrassing, it's not polite. So that's why even to one's own home, before walking in, a person must knock first. Never go without shoes. This for a number of reasons. In fact, this law is so strict that the Gemara says a person should sell everything he has, especially one who is learned, in order to buy shoes. The most important garment is shoes. And it's not that simple. We find that the beracha we say in the morning, one beracha we say in the morning for clothing, in particular, which article of clothing is shoes. Sadly called tzadiki, that beracha is blessing Hashem for shoes. So if you say the beracha, it means you're going to wear shoes throughout. There are other reasons why a person should never go without shoes, and of course this is a more serious thing, where it invites chas v'shalom tragedy. The only time a person goes without shoes is when he is chas v'shalom in a avel. He's in mourning. Therefore, this is something that should be avoided at all costs. Shoes must always be worn except to bed. So there too, the Gemara says elsewhere, a person wants to feel a taste of death. Slight taste of death. What it tastes like. What it feels like by sleeping with shoes on. You might not detect it, but there is that slight taste there. Which means that a person should always wear shoes except to bed. Besides, you make the sheets dirty. The Kiva added too, always eat breakfast, whether it is summer or winter. No matter what the weather is like. A person might have an excuse that at certain times of the year you can get along without food in the morning. And the Akiva advised always eat breakfast, because breakfast will help you against being harmed by the cold in the winter, against being harmed by the sun, the heat in the summertime. Generally, it says that breakfast saves a person from 83 different types of diseases. The most important meal is breakfast. So this means, of course, breakfast means not just to eat food, but to wash, specifically bread. Breakfast without bread is not considered breakfast. Better a little bit of bread than a heavy meal without bread. Rabbi Akiva ordered too that it is better that you make your Shabbat into a weekday. That means the meal. Eat a weekday meal. We know that a Jew always saves his money in order to buy the best food for Shabbat. There's no comparison between a weekday meal and a Shabbat meal. Rabbi Akiva said it is better to have a weekday meal on Shabbat, that means a light meal, a cheap meal, rather than to have to beg or borrow the money for the Shabbat meal. Spend your own for the little that you can get your own money, rather than to beg or borrow in order to have a better meal on Shabbat. Despite this, the Gemara adds later on that there must still be a difference between the Shabbat meal and the weekend, at least a small difference. And the Gemara asks, what is that difference? A person cannot afford to buy fish. The Gemara says to buy little sardines. But something in the family of fish. For kavod Shabbat, no matter how little you can afford. Rabbi Akiva said, taught his son, try your best, strive when dealing in business, to deal with, and go in partnership with a person who has a streak of good fortune. One who's successful in business, you go in partnership with him, you will succeed too. Or deal with him with anything, selling, buying, rather than one whose faith, whose mazal, is chas v'shalom bad. Attach yourself to one whose mazal is good, it will rub off upon you. This is not chas v'shalom a superstition. The Gemara learns this from Eov. So that, if possible, a person should try to become partners with or do dealings with those who are successful. This was Rabbi Akiva to his son. Now the Gemara says that when Rabbi Akiva was in prison, the Romans had him in prison just before they put him to death. Rabbi Arizal, his student, came to the prison, and he said to Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi, teach me Torah. Rabbi Akiva said, I will not teach you. Why? Because naturally, if he was caught teaching him, then they could put Rabbi Arizal in prison too. Rabbi Arizal said to Rabbi Akiva, if you don't teach me Torah now, I'm going to tell my father Rabbi Yochai, and he's going to report you to the king and get you in trouble. This is a very strange type of threat. Rabbi Akiva answered, my son, do you think that I don't want to teach you Torah? Much more than a calf wants to be nursed, a cow wants to nurse. Meaning much more than a student wants to learn Torah, the rabbi would certainly much more than teach him Torah. It's just that it's dangerous now. It's really a Arizal said, but who is in danger? It's the calf that's in danger. You're not in danger teaching Torah, you're in prison anyhow. I'm the one that's in danger, and I am willing to accept that danger because I want to study Torah. Well, what did he mean when he said, I'm going to report you to the king, or father report you to the king and get you in trouble? What he meant was, not chas v'shalom disrespectfully. I think Arizal explains this in a Kabbalah term, very deep Kabbalah, but he will take only the simple explanation. Simply it meant, the Gemara says that a rabbi must teach a student Torah. If he doesn't, it's considered Gizelah. He's stealing his right. The student has a right to learn Torah, and the rabbi is depriving him of that right if he doesn't teach him. Therefore, the Gemara says that the penalty is, for the rabbi refuses to teach Torah, that he may be imprisoned, in a sense, he receives a penalty equal to imprisonment. Lashes, or worse, you don't want to use the exact term. Shulchan Arizal hinted at that when he fought you to the king, meaning that the rule is that you're supposed to be in prison for not teaching Torah. Depriving of Torah. The Akiva answered, of course I would teach you Torah. Not that I want to deprive you, Chas v'Shalom. Just that I have pity upon you that you should not be placed in jeopardy. You're risking your life. Shulchan Arizal answered, it is me that is in danger, and you need not worry about my sakana. That's my affair. I am willing to take a risk for the sake of the study of Torah, and you should go along with me. But the Akiva said, fine. He said, take these words of advice. For the future, if anyone, if you want to be hung, then be hung on a large tree. We use these words as a sort of code. So in case he'd be heard by the Romans, they wouldn't know he was teaching Torah. And this was coded message, meaning you want people to accept your words. You tell them a law of Torah, a din, and you want them to accept it. Don't say it yourself. Quote it in the name of the Arjun, name of the rabbi who said it. A large training, bring the biggest rabbi who said it as your source of information, and they will surely accept it. They will not refute it to try to argue it. Always quote the origin. That's general when it's writing. And it says one who quotes the origin, the name of the person who said it, he brings Mashiach closer. Here, if you want these words to be accepted, not only quote the origin, but quote the highest rabbi who said it, so that they will not question it. They'll accept it much more quickly. You'll save the time of arguing about it. Secondly, you teach your son. You can teach him in a sefer that's been examined previously, but there are no errors in it. Because when a child learns Torah, and the print was done carelessly, there are errors in the print. The child's mind is one that absorbs very solidly. And once he absorbs an error, it's very hard to get that error out of his mind. He reads something where it's mistaken print, the statement is wrong, and trying to get that error rooted out of his mind, and you find difficulty because the child's mind takes in something, it stays there permanently. So before you allow your child to learn from any sefer of Torah, be sure that the sefer is a new one that's been examined and has been revised where the errors were removed. Third, he said, do not cook in the same pot that your friend cooked. This means, the Gemara says, advice. Do not marry a divorcee, because you will find that there's a mixture that's wrong, that's unpleasant. She'll always be speaking of her first husband and always making comparisons. Say that where you are better than her first husband, nothing will be mentioned. But should there be a fault found in you, you'll bring up the point, my first husband was better in this respect. Or in general, you can find a general life with you not as pleasant as with the first one, but it's to do a lot of harm to harmony in married life. Therefore, try to avoid a divorcee, at least during her husband's life. If he is not alive anymore, then there is a much smaller risk of her bringing him up or making comparison because of the that's gone. So, the Akiva said this, do not marry a divorcee, thinking about the fault lying with the woman. Why shouldn't this apply to a woman being advised not to marry a man who divorced his wife? He told that comparison, and he did it for her. The answer is that according to Hebrew law, Torah law, the law of divorce is that a man can divorce his wife at will, whenever he wishes, whenever he pleases, against her will. The wife can never divorce the husband at all. So, therefore, where the man has divorced his first wife, he cannot make comparisons anymore. He divorced her because she wasn't good, he didn't like her at all. There's no problem. There's no danger of him thinking about the qualities of his first wife. But this was only in those times. Nowadays that we have the chedem Rabbi Gershon, when Rabbi Gershon gave out this chedem that no man can divorce a woman against her will, and the same advice applies to women too. Since a man divorces a wife not against her will, but with the consent of both, or whether they were compelled to become divorced for a different reason, then the same advice applies to women. Will not marry a man who is divorced, but he will make the comparison, and it can make life bitter. This is what is called a hidden term, cooking in the same pot that your friend cooked. Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi taught Rabbi three things. One, do not cause a defect upon yourself. A mum means a physical defect. Don't make yourself a physical defect. What does that mean? Do not go into court against three people. Yourself on one side as a plaintiff or defendant, against the opposing side is a party of three. Because many times they'll be unscrupulous and they'll break it up into a party of one. One of them will go to court against you, the other two become witnesses for him. You automatically lose the case that way. So if you're going against three, you'll lose the case. Arrange to have, if it's a case like that, avoid going to court. Make it settled, because it's still better than going into a court where you are sure to lose. Second, do not stand over an item in a store, in a shop, looking at it, staring at it, studying it, when you don't have money with you to buy it. You arouse the excitement on the part of the shopkeeper, the storekeeper, the anxiety. He tries his best to sell it to you with the hope, you build up this hope that you're going to make a sale. When you know certainly that you don't have money with you, you can't buy it. This, of course, means, too, where you know definitely you're not going to buy a certain item, even if you do have money. Well, I mean definitely, because in many cases when a person thinks he's definite, a good salesman changes his mind. When a person certainly will not buy this item, he should not stand there looking at it, because he will cause a sadness, hard feeling on the part of the storekeeper who thought he might have had a sale, and it turned out to be a letdown. Third item was the case of carefulness about the laws of the death in many details, which of course are too to go into now. But these laws were taught in those days with such stringency, they were passed down to us with added strictness. And remember always that the laws of the death are laws of karet, how careful a person should be about mikveh for the wife, much more so than mikveh for a man. And to be well acquainted with the laws of the death too, you should not be trapped into doing something unwittingly that might be wrong. The other is, a person should not go out alone at night, because the shadim who are found in the streets seek out a person going alone. They will generally not attack people going in twos and pairs. A person going alone, they seek them out and they attack them. The Unit says this was up to a certain point, because the fact was that the leader of this shadim has an army of 180,000 angels of destruction and Jesus army out in the streets, and everyone has permission from heaven to damage any person they meet. So there was a time once when they constituted a real danger. Till one day, he mentions that Menachem Mendel Schneerson was out in the street, and this Sheda met him, and she said to Menachem Mendel Schneerson, it's not for the fact that in heaven I hear the announcement saying, be careful, beware of the Hamida, my son, and his Torah. How precious he is in the eyes of heaven, that I would have put your life in danger. The Hamida answered, if I am considered so important in heaven, I hereby decree that you should never come into civilized areas anymore. You stay in forests, jungles, deserts, but never come into civilization again. She pleaded with him. She said, you're a good-hearted person. Have pity on me. Allow me a little bit of time. I shouldn't be locked up in these desert areas. He said to her, fine, I'll allow you Friday night and Tuesday night. Because these are 2 nights in the week when Jews generally stay at home. They don't go out on Friday night. And Tuesday nights, too, for some reason, they were unaccustomed to going out. So from that time on, the Gemara says the warning was given out. A person should never go out alone on Friday nights or Tuesday nights. Many years later, she went out and she met Abaye alone. She said to Abaye, it's not for the fact that in heaven they announced, beware of Abaye and his Torah, I would have put your life in danger now. Abaye said to her, if I am that important in heaven, then I decree that you should never again come into civilization ever. Meaning even these 2 nights which were granted to you, you should be deprived of now. There was no way of her bargaining for any permission, which means that they no longer jeopardize civilized areas. So you're going to ask, but we do see that Shedim are present. At times they are found in cities. You're going to answer, these are not regular visitors. The armies of the Shedim are outside of the cities. Once in a while they overstep the boundary. One of their horses runs off, they have to run in to retrieve it, accidentally as they come into the city. But ordinarily, there are no Shedim permitted to come into civilized areas. They are found only in desolate, isolated places. The Gemara says that the Rav gave advice to his student Savasi. Told him, do not live in a city where the head of the city is either a Talmud Bavly, as we said before, or a doctor, a Havdil, because they both, the Havdil, are so occupied with their own type of studies that they are forced to ignore the needs of the public. Second, do not live in a city where there are no guards, horses, dogs, guard dogs to protect property, meaning no dogs to guard their properties, no horses to chase after thieves if they do steal, because naturally this will invite thieves to that place. Third, he said, do not marry 2 wives, because if you marry 2 wives, very possible they might become very friendly and plan something harmful to you, poison you, or anything like that. If you are going to marry more than 1 wife, marry 3. Because generally, out of the 3, you'll have 1 that will be loyal. So in case 2 of them will make an evil plan against you, the 3rd one will reveal that plan to you. inside out. Which means that when you say a word, it should be the same in your mind as on your tongue. When you give a word, it should be kept. Your yes should be a yes, and a no should be a no. Do not change your word. Also, strip an animal, which is a very low type of trade, in the middle of the marketplace. Do not be ashamed, as long as that is your trade. That is your work. You're getting wages for it. Nothing to be ashamed about. Still an honest living. Rather than do something dishonest, where you might feel more professional, a higher level, but since there might be a trace of dishonesty or begging, borrowing, it is better to work in an honest trade, no matter how low it may be. Never say that it's not fit for my kavod. There's no bigger kavod than earning an honest dollar. If you go out on a trip, no matter how short the trip is, always take food with you. You never know if you might come to a place where there'll be no food available. You might arrive at night, the stores are closed. You might come to a place where there's no hotel or inn to buy food, so that, or you might not have a kosher supply somewhere. Always take food with you, you'll be safe and certain. God said to his son Rabbi Chia this advice: do not take medicines, which means do not take drugs. Any type of drugs, narcotics. Two reasons. First place, they are very habit-forming, and therefore they can prove dangerous. Plus the fact that they can prove dangerous financially. A person takes drugs that are habit-forming, he is forced into a new expense that increases as time goes by. It reaches a point that's more than he can afford. So this can lead him to a life of crime. This sounds like a statement that was made a few years ago. This was said by Rav nearly 2,000 years ago. There's a forewarning at that time for what's so obvious today. Rav also said do not take big steps, because a person takes long steps affects his eyesight. As he said, the eyesight is affected by a long step, and it's corrected by looking at the candles at the time of kiddush on Friday night. Do not have a tooth pulled at all costs. Treat it as much as possible. It's a living thing, trying to keep a tooth as long as a person is alive. Unless that's it's affected, it's impossible to keep it. But if there's the slightest chance of treating a tooth, then have confidence and hope that this tooth can be cured. Apparently, for these words, it seems that if a person is careful, there's no reason to ever lose any tooth. That's what appears to be the words in the commentaries. But at least the lesson is that a person could certainly keep teeth much longer than dentists advise. So never take the advice of a dentist to pull a tooth until you're exhausted every possible means of saving and sparing it. And do not start up with goyim, because there are ways, that's for sure, that they could get back at Jews. So avoid open confrontation with goyim as much as possible. This was the advice of Rav. Told his sons the following words of advice. Do not live in a certain city, he mentioned, but this means any city where this holds true. Where the people there are litzanim, pranksters, jokesters who like to play jokes and pranks, who kid around too much. Because the Torah warns against litzanut. The first sentence in Tehillim, King David starts dealing with the words Ashrei Ha'ish. Blessed, fortunate is that person who does not stay in the company of Leitzim, those who like to joke around too much, because this is not a place for joking, meaning this world is a place of seriousness. A person should take life seriously, especially not to bring on simcha with foolish items. Simcha of mitzvah, yes, certainly. It says, do et Hashem b'simcha. Serve Hashem with simcha, but not the kind of simcha that's wrong, honolulu. Therefore, he said, in a city where these people are in abundance, avoid staying close to them. Avoid even living in that city. Secondly, he said, do not sit on the bed of a goya. What does that mean? One thing it means, do not go to sleep without saying Kriyat Shema. That's like a goy goes to bed. Goes right to sleep. A Jew, before going to bed, is supposed to say Kriyat Shema. Is supposed to offer his soul up to Hashem. I offer my soul to Hashem for safekeeping. Hashem can't commit. Another interpretation is, or the meaning behind it was, because of the story of Papa, who once sat on the bed of was about to sit on the bed of a Goya, and he realized that this Goya had killed her son. The child was dead, and she waited him to sit down on that bed, and she could accuse him of killing her child. And therefore, we cannot trust places where these Goyim might falsely accuse a Jew of such types of murder. Rabbi Nachman also said to his children, be very careful not to ever try to avoid paying taxes to the government or trying to smuggle goods through customs, because eventually you may be caught, and the fines and penalties might cost you so many times over what you expected to gain by saving these taxes that you could possibly lose your entire fortune, chas v'shalom. This, in addition to the fact that there is a law, the Torah, forbidden to steal from Goyim. There's a law that you must obey the laws of the land. The Torah, which says you must obey the laws of the land. Aside from this, is also the advice to not be foolish and think you may gain anything, because the loss involved could be many-fold that of a slight gain. The Papa said, do not go into a house where cats are found. A house where there's a cat. Do not go into that house without shoes, because a cat is the one animal that has the power to defeat a snake in battle. It kills a snake and eats it. Snakes generally have small germs, bacteria. And these are very dangerous. And if a person goes into this house or walks in that house without shoes, the germs attach themselves to his feet, and it can cause untold harm. The Gemara says, on the other hand, a person should not go into a house where there are no cats at all, because of the fact that he might be attacked by a snake, and he can have the same type of risk to his life. The house where there are cats, you will generally not find any snakes. The greatest precaution against snakes. The Gemara says now that there are three types of people that a person should not start up with, be jealous of, try to do harm, or three types of katan, young. Three types of young not to start with. One is a young goy. Another is a small snake. Third is a small young student, because you never know what the future holds in store for them. This young guy might someday become a governor or a king, And he might take it out against all Jews, chas v'shalom. You better tell the story of such a case like that, where the Jews started with a young guy and then they caused them a lot of damage later on to the entire city. A small snake has a long memory. When he grows older, he remembers the place where he was harmed, and he comes back to take revenge. A young student who is mistreated, he becomes older and more learned and more advanced than those who had mistreated him before. He now comes back to play them down, to show them up at their level, and he can cause much more embarrassment than was caused him when he was young. Even as further advice is that when you go out to do business and you return you went to a distant place to purchase certain merchandise, and you came back. And while the dust was still on your shoes, it means you had no time to rest even, get rid of what you bought. Never hold on to merchandise long. Sell it as quickly as you can. The moment you come back, go right to the marketplace and sell it. It's not healthy to hold on to goods and hope that the prices will go up. Also, if you're in doubt about selling a thing at a certain price, first sell it, and then be sorry later that you sold it too quickly, because you find you could have gotten a higher price. It is better to be sorry having sold a thing at a smaller profit than to deeply regret the fact that you didn't sell it and you're stuck with that goods completely later on. Small regret compared to the big regret of not being able to sell it at all and lose even your principal investment. Advice to a businessman: the person comes into your store to buy any kind of item, food for example, which has to be placed into a bag, to a container, or any kind of merchandise put into a package. Before you package this item, or these items, first take the cash, put it into your pocket, and then package the items and give it to the customer. Because if you don't, you'll always find yourself in a controversy, argument with the customer as to whether the money has been paid or not. First, make sure you have the money in your pocket, and then open the bag and place the merchandise into it. Rabbi Nachman said a number of items of advice. When you go out to battle, never be the first to go out. Be the last. Try to be the last one of the battle lines, so that when the time comes to return, you'll be the first one into the city. If you are victorious, then you get the first gala, the first cheers, the first biggest gifts. You'll be the last one killed and the first one rewarded for this victory. So, as a matter of advice, safety advice, try to stay in the rear lines always, because you'll end up first when it comes to where it counts most. The hidden message here is the rear lines means be the lowest of the top, the tail of a lion, because you'll still be part of the lion which is first, uppermost. If you have a daughter who is of age, in those days of age meant she reached the age of 12 and a half, and she is not married yet, give her anyone to get her out. Even if you have a slave, free that slave and marry her off to that slave.
who stated clearly that any person who will be a student in this group, he accepts as his student. This he said during the last few years of his life. He was to make the age of 96. He said this a year before his passing, which meant, referred to the fact that he will accept these as a student after his passing, and ultimately after the student's passing, which is most important. He will be a lawyer to defend the person who comes to the heavenly court. It's a very powerful lawyer. Speak to the emet. So going to his field the next morning, the names of all these names are mentioned there in Tefillah, in the same vein, same detail, and then followed by the trip to Kever Acher, to immediately afterwards, Kever Acher Imenu, who is called the mother of warmth and care for children. Rachel Bat Yamanah, Rachel cries over her children who are in Galut. She refuses to be consoled in every sense. Nothing can console Rachel or stop her tears until her children will come back to the Shemu Bad and Gulam. Children come back within their boundaries and then Israel out of Galut. Then the trip to Be'erat HaMachpelah, prayer says the cave of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the fathers of the Jews, the mothers Baranes Kerach and Leah, and greater Adam and Chava. These four couples of the prayer said, followed by the Tefillah in the Yeshiva itself, the Arizal Yeshiva Yerushalmi, the Misha Derach said at the Sefer Torah, mentioning all these names. And then, trip to Rabbi Shimon Bar Arizal, the author of the Zohar Kadosh, was called the Holy Light, and the Kadosh, the Arizal, in the Mikveh of the Arizal, the Arizal says that, the Arizal himself says that one who goes to this Mikveh, the Mikveh is that holy that the person going there receives the assurance he will not leave this world in an impure state. He just learned about the person contaminating himself in sin, purifying himself through his work. But he also says a person will not leave this world tameh. If you go to that mikveh, Arizal will assist that person to leave this world pure. Now that means to leave himself, cleanse himself of his sins. How? For the Teshuva. He'll be assured of going to Teshuva. That's the mikveh of Arizal. Arizal says that there is, aside from this, there's also dinim. That means sometimes, that's the Shalom Satan gets after a person. He's after him. He's out to get him, to capture him either in sin or to torment him in different ways. In other words, a person can be hurt either physically or spiritually, both being the work of the Satan. A person has hardships in business or misfortunes. Things just go wrong. Everything turns wrong, and that's because that's the Shalom he's got behind him, the Satan pursuing him at every move. At the same time, a person could find that he weakens when it comes to committing sins. This too is the work of Satan. He has his eye on this person, that person is in trouble. This is called dinim, harsh judgment during a person's lifetime. To correct that is called hamtakatim, to sweeten this. This is bitter, to sweeten it. There are many ways to bring about hamtakatim. One of the most effective radical cures is a person going to mikveh and staying down for a long time till he cannot stay in that breath. So if that is so in any mikveh, mention these values in the mikveh of Arizal. You go down and hold your breath until it's impossible to keep it anymore. When you have the assurance of Arizal to lose the meaning of that contamination, plus having this hamtakatim. There too, with the last ounce of breath, the tefillah was said. And then, something which we didn't have time for, but which we felt still the effect of this Saradin, of course, is our rabbi as well as yours. You don't realize that. The Becker says, the author of the Shulchan Aruch, in addition to the Arizal, Rabbi Shimon Zal, went to the Becker says, the name is mentioned, and ultimately back to the King David tune. We also said a prayer mentioning all the names at the grave of King Solomon, the wives, to give you wisdom. And also King Solomon's son and grandson, King Haskiel. All these places, many more kings, these names are mentioned. Of course, this is also known as the cave of Malchai Yisrael, kings of the Jews. So that the mission was accomplished as assured previously. The only thing we say is, that these Zilot should become fulfilled. Everyone should be blessed with this. If you all strive for the Kedusha,